Alright guys, well I'm beginning to frame this gate out. I've got these pieces kind of mocked up here. You can see I've got this notch taken out of this 2x4. I've got the same one inversed at top. I'm using this style of gate hardware, the hinges. They're going to sit coming up from the back about right there. So that is the space right there for the hinge to pivot. Now if you can see what I've done on the back, I've measured in and bored up in here with a paddle bit. This is actually going to sit right in here, leaving myself a 1/4 inch exposed. This will get mortised out all the way into this from the back side, so it will lay flat and flush. So I'll take it down in 2 stages. I believe this is maybe 3/8 and this is 3/16. So I started here because I want to go ahead and get these glued and screwed where they go, so I can do all that mortising in one shot. I'm going to put a screw in here across this way, and I'm going to counter bore maybe to the midpoint and put a 3.5 inch screw right there. That will keep me out of the way when I mortise this in. I won't be hitting my fasteners. Well, alright guys, I've got this portion of the gate frame glued and screwed together. Again, I'm using this tight bond polyurethane glue. It seems to be working quite well. This is what I was referring to on mortising in the hinge. You can see I've come down here 3/16 of an inch. I did that with a trim router, took all of that out pretty much freehand, came in with a chisel and cleaned that up. Then I dropped down to 3/8 for this portion, which just happened to split right there at the 2x4. So now you can see how this was meant to fit in here. It's mortised in, flush, looks good, and this portion of the hinge goes right there. I'm at the stage now where I need to just simply pierce these holes, put in some carriage bolts and some fasteners, and we're moving on. Alright guys, it's starting to look like a gate. I've made some progress here. I've got my bracing in, glued and screwed. My perimeter banding has been cut and mocked up here. It's ready to be fastened on. I'm not going to glue all these pieces. I'm going to glue this one and this one, but the top one and the bottom one are just going to be fastened on with screws. Reason being, if I ever need to take these caps off to gain access to this hinge for any reason, I'll be able to do that. I'm trying to hide all my fasteners the best I can. This top is going to be counterbored and latched on from underneath. The bottom will just simply be screwed up from the bottom, and then I will have exposed screws on the outside edges. They'll only be seen when the gate's actually open. Hopefully now you can see what I was going for with this type of hinge setup. You can see how it will swing both ways. The reason it's so far in here is I want as tight a gap as possible. If I just put these hinges out on the end with this 3.5 inch width, I'd have to have a good 2 inch gap or so to make that arc without contacting these corners. I guess you could 45 them off, but this is the way I elected to do it. It's going to be a nice cleaner look. I'm at the point now where I need to add some grease to these, fasten these on, and then the row of pickets will be fastened on the outside. We're looking at the inside of the gate right now, and this is the way it will look. Alright guys, I've got all the banding installed and got the hinges lubricated. I'm down to just installing the pickets on this, cutting them to fit, and this portion will be complete. Alright guys, well I've got the pickets installed. This gate is 59 inches in height as you see it. It'll be round about 1 inch off the ground, so 5 feet to the top. I built it 5 feet, so hopefully the dog can't scale it. And secondly, I wanted to be able to look over it to look out if I chose to. Now, if she does use this bracing as a ladder, I've got room. I can always install pickets on the back to detour her even further. Alright, well here's a quick shot of the show side. This will be out facing. This completes this portion of the gate build. Now it's a matter of finalizing my posts, bracing them, and installing the gate. Alright guys, well I'm making some brackets to receive the threaded rod that comes off the hinge. I didn't want that just bearing on the wood because over time it would compress and sag, and then I'd have to keep adjusting the gate. So what I've done was laid out on this bar stock, one on each end, the brackets that I'm making. I did it this way because it's easier to hold the work. After I was finished with all these operations, I'll cut this off. These are just a couple of test holes to get the fit that I wanted. I was going to weld this using this pipe here, but I figured, well, it's already got a thread on it. I might as well just punch a hole and thread it. So I've got it to where when it tightens up, it takes all the threads, and then I'll turn off this section here once everything is tight, measure it, cut it off to length, and then these two holes right here are countersunk to receive these two screws. That should help everything stay in place without any sagging, and that's my goal. Alright guys, well these brackets are assembled and ready for prime and paint. I threaded it in, tightened it up, faced this off here on my lathe, and then finally cut it to the length I was wanting. I believe they're going to work out just fine. Alright guys, well I've got the gate hung and I've made more progress. These are the brackets I made that were painted up. You can see how I've mortised them in there. This bolt for that hinge was a little shy, so I've got a counter bore up in here twice. I've got the supports in. Right here I've run a 7-inch lag bolt all the way through into this trim. Put a little wedge in here to support it. I've got another one down there somewhere. Got my pickets on a little filler piece here and there to fill that gap. A temporary latch here to hold it shut. It swings super nice and easy. Slightest bit of wind will just blow it right open. It's heavy. That's why I used the lag bolts and whatnot. I didn't want it moving. It's actually quite rigid. I've got another little wedge right here with another 7-inch lag bolt that shoots into the shop. Quick shot from the outside. Looking pretty good. I'm at the point now where I'm working out my custom spring latch to go in here because I need it to be able to swing both ways. It's just the way I'm going to do that as well. And then after that is taken care of, I'll clip these posts off, and I'm making custom copper caps that will go on top, and that will complete the build of the gate. Okay, well I've been working on the latch hardware. I started off with this piece of 3/4 by 3/4 by 1/8 angle iron and whittled away at it until I created this bracket. It simply has two countersunk holes. You can see the ramps on either side and then the ramped notch in the middle. I'm going to be using this piece of 1/8" by 3/4 flat bar as my spring. It will be bent with a couple of crooks in it here to create the spring tension. It will ride up the ramp and latch down into the slot from either side. I'm going to go ahead and mortise this in, get it installed, put a couple of bends in this, couple holes for lag bolts, and get it mounted on the gate so I can at least test it and make sure it will work. I believe it's going to work just fine. And beyond that, I'm going to use a round bar welded to the top here that will sneak around the corners to create the handles on either side. So when you walk up to the gate, you'll in essence grab it, kind of pull it over, go out, and then push it back and it will close and latch in. Alright guys, well I've got some hardware mocked up in here. I've made a mistake that became painfully obvious quickly after putting this on, but you see how I've got this spring right here. I've got this mortised in, and I've had to modify it. Where I messed up was the angle I used right here was 30 degrees, and that was not steep enough. So when the latch would come in, if you just pushed it, it would hit this other side and ramp its way out. So to try to eliminate that problem, you can see I've filed down in here a 10-degree angle and widened this gap up just a little bit. It works great from one side but not the other. I didn't quite have enough meat in here for some reason. I did all this by hand files, so that's probably a good indicator of why. So I'll close it from this side with a little pretty heavy push, and you'll see it just glide right through. But if I come back this way, it catches in just like I want. Another problem I initiated because I deepened that slot is I've got to move this lever further over now to clear it. And like I said, I was going to use a piece of round bar in here, and it's going to be very tight to get the distance that I need. So I think I'm going to go ahead and continue on with this. And what I may end up having to do is either make this all together again, which I would not want to do, with the proper angles in here, with a slight relief, kind of like this one. Or I may try to fill this edge with some weld bead and then file it back into a different shape. This is what happens when you're prototyping on your finished product. Sometimes you have to make adjustments. But aside from that, it seems like it's going to work just fine. Alright, well, I've made my gate handle. This is just a piece of 3/8 inch round bar. I just torch heated it, did it freehand. It's not quite perfect side to side, but it's good enough. Alright guys, well, I've got the handle welded on. Got everything mocked up. I did make some minor adjustments. Number one is I just had this bolted to the surface, and because of its length and it contacting up there, it had a tendency to want to move back and forth. So I mortised this in to hopefully mitigate that and stiffen it so it can't move as much. So you just simply push it down, we'll go out. Just like so. I believe I'm going to leave it just like that. I need to pull this all back off, brighten it up a little bit, and I'm going to do a boiled linseed oil. I'll heat it up and wipe it down with boiled linseed oil to blacken it and give it some rust protection. Alright, well, I've cut my posts off. I've made custom copper caps for the tops. I've outlined that in another video if anybody's interested in watching how I made those. Here's a quick shot of the latch after it was blackened with the boiled linseed oil. Turned out fairly well. Here's a shot after blackening the handle itself. This in essence is a spring, so I didn't want to put too much heat into this, so this section kind of turned out a little bit blotchy. It's just the way it is. It was very difficult to heat this anyway. I don't have a rosebud or anything like that. I was just simply using a MAP gas torch. So on this handle section, I busted it in two. I did one side and then did the other side. I basically brought it up through the purple spectrum into the blue and just into the grays. And that's when I started applying the linseed oil light off of a rag. Let it kind of dry a little bit, and I just kept coating it as it cooled, and it turned out pretty good, especially something like this being my first foray into anything I would consider blacksmith work. I'm quite pleased with it. Well, alright guys, it's all wrapped up. I decided on this catch right here. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. It works well enough. Show you a final shot from the outside. quite a bit of work, but it turned out really nice. Super smooth. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck.